get started. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Tracey Osborne Oltjen. I'm the president of the chamber. So it's wonderful to be fully back in person for the Fireside Chat series. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We are recording. We're not hybrid, so we're not broadcasting live this afternoon. So do feel free if you would like a snack. They are all over here against the side of the room, so help yourselves. But we are recording this afternoon, so don't walk in front of the camera. But we are very happy to have each one of you with us today for our Fireside Chat with Dr. Tonya Merrigan, who is the Superintendent of Blue Valley School District. So thank you so much for joining us, and we want to especially thank our sponsor today, BHC. Today we have with us the president of BHC, Kevin Hanemichael, who I think many of you do know. He is well known in our community as a leader, not just in the engineering community, but for his support of infrastructure, of one of the most important components of our infrastructure, which is public education. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kevin now, who is going to introduce our featured guest. So Kevin, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to provide the introduction. Dr. Tonya Merrigan assumed the role of Blue Valley School District Superintendent in the summer of 2020, making her the 8th Blue Valley Superintendent and the first female superintendent in district history. She has over 30 years experience in education, beginning as a math teacher. So I'm presuming you got your teacher certificate in high school.
Yeah. Actually, grade school.
Grade school. Since joining the Blue Valley School District in 1999 as a high school counselor, Dr. Merrigan has held a variety of positions, moving from assistant principal to district administrator for virtual education, to executive director of curriculum and instruction, to deputy superintendent, and then on to superintendent. Dr. Merrigan earned her bachelor's and master's degree from the University of South Dakota. So Tonya, okay if I call you Tonya at this point?
Absolutely.
Sure. So I'm sure you're aware that K-State opens the football season on September 3rd, hosting the South Dakota Cubs. My connection is that one of my son's good friends growing up in the DeSoto School District is a sophomore on the South Dakota football team and is expecting to get some playing time. So watch for number 30, Austin Rosetta, in the linebacker position.
Awesome.
And I think you mentioned you, through a nephew, also have a connection with DeSoto High.
I do.
So he may know Austin. So if Greg Musel were here, he would know this stat probably off the top of his head. But the K-State versus South Dakota matchup stands at 5-0 in favor of K-State. What's really shocking about that stat is that 3 of those wins occurred in the early 80s when K-State football was awful. So, and I don't mean that in offense to South Dakota. What I'm saying is I'm really surprised that it's not 3-2 in favor of South Dakota.
So South Dakota had to beat KU.
I get to do the introduction the way I want. All right, moving on. So Tonya became Dr. Merrigan at St. Louis University. I got nothing on St. Louis. Anybody? Any St. Louis University alumni? Anybody from St. Louis? Nothing. All right. She describes her leadership style as team-centered. I think we're going to hear more about that in our chat today. But in my conversation with her, she talked about the importance of working together and creating a work-life environment where not only can you sustain yourself, but an environment where your staff can sustain themselves. Tonya took the role of district superintendent, which, if you don't know, is a role that's subject to a lot of scrutiny, maybe some criticism, maybe some judgment, but she took that position in COVID. No potential for controversial decision-making at that point, huh? So, but on a personal level, we found that we had a couple of habits that resulted from the COVID era. We both took up walking a lot, more as a way to find quiet time and to decompress and recenter. We both also discussed that we eat a lot better, maybe not to the benefit of the fast food restaurants, but probably to the benefit of our waistlines and our cholesterol levels and that kind of thing. And she also relayed that one of the ways she deals with stress is to get back into the classroom. So don't be surprised to find her in a kindergarten classroom, not evaluating teacher performance, but as a way to stay focused. So I'm excited to hear from Dr. Merrigan and get to know her better. So let's welcome Dr. Tonya Merrigan to the OP Chamber Fireside Chat.
Well, that's a fantastic introduction, Kevin, and so personal. Thank you very much, South Dakota slamming aside. I know that Greg Musil would probably have several things to add to that. So thank you very much. And Tonya, it really is wonderful to have you here. And I think we could probably go down a whole rabbit hole of math teachers who become superintendents if Dr. Trigg was here with us. So we may explore that just a little bit. But this Fireside Chat series came about because we really wanted an opportunity to have a little bit more of an informal opportunity to chat with community leaders and learn just a little bit more about their personal lives and the professional paths that they've taken to leadership. And in particular, for someone like you, when you came into your leadership role during a time, we hate to use that overused word, unprecedented. What it meant was that it wasn't the kind of role that you originally signed on to take before COVID happened. But the side effect of that was we didn't get to welcome you in the traditional ways that we normally would have as a community. We didn't get to know you. You weren't out and about. You really were just head down trying to deal with both the health and the education challenges that COVID presented for the district. And so, on behalf of the community, I want to thank you and everyone at the Blue Valley District for everything that you did. But now, in a belated way, we want to get to know you just a little bit more in a personal way. So thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely, I'm honored that you would know me.
Great. Well, let's dive right in. So Kevin talked just a little bit about your background and kind of gave us that overall view. So let's talk a little bit about your childhood and how you came to be Dr. Merrigan. So did you always aspire to this? Did you know what you wanted to be? How did you get on that path?
So I've wanted to be a teacher ever since I can remember. I was the one in the basement at our house. I had a brother who was a year older and a sister who was 2 years younger, and I was the teacher. I was the one playing school with the neighborhood kids, and so I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I really thought I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher until I went to college, and a professor in college convinced me that I really should look at math, and I should really look at high school, because at the time there weren't a lot of females who taught math or science, and because I had an affinity for that and I liked it, he really thought I should do that. And so I did, got a major in math and a minor in chemistry, and taught high school math, and it was a great experience for me. So that's where I started.
So STEM before STEM was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it. But Dr. Carantinos forever will be my mentor. He was the one that kind of pulled me aside at the University of South Dakota and said, hey, honestly, it was my sophomore year, and I was going to get a math minor. And I was in the math methods class that he taught, and he pulled me aside and said, you're in the wrong place. We really need you here. And it made sense to me, so I did that. I will say, I have such respect for our kindergarten teachers, and I look in those classrooms now, and I don't know if I could have done it or not, because it is, whew, they work hard. But I just love education in general.
Yeah.
Love everything about it.
So you're kind of answering my next question, which is talk about mentors in your life and what they've meant to you. Obviously, you had one that helped you change your path just a little bit. It didn't completely alter the path that you were on, but it kind of scooched you over just a little bit. So talk a little bit about Dr. Caratino and the mentors, and maybe some really significant lessons that you've learned, and maybe how you pass that on.
So Dr. Carantinos for sure was my first mentor, and so I got my degree in math education, and I actually went, at the time there were no teaching jobs in the Midwest. I actually remember applying in Kansas City, applied in Omaha, applied in Sioux City, applied in Sioux Falls, which were the larger cities around here, applied in Minneapolis, ended up getting a job in Houston, not even anywhere near, but took a job, sight unseen, went down to Houston, had a great experience. It was just too far away from my family. And so I decided I was going to come, and I stayed in contact with Dr. Carantinos. And he convinced me that I should come back and get a master's in math. And I could do it in a year at the University of South Dakota again. And if I just went full time, I could be a teaching assistant. And then the plan was to go get my PhD in math. You know, I maxed out in math. Like, I hit my limit during the master's.
That's a lot of math.
And it was like, I am not going to get a PhD.
I maxed out earlier than that, by the way.
Way early. I'd say that it was a good experience because it taught me the struggle that students felt, because I felt it. I hadn't really felt it as an undergraduate. I felt it that year. But I got through, got my master's in math. Knew that I didn't want to go on any further, so I got a teaching job there in South Dakota. So you go from Houston, Texas, you know what, fourth largest school district in the country, to Vermillion, South Dakota, which is a school of 600. Both were fabulous experiences. But the second mentor, I would say, was my principal at Vermillion High School. His name was Dr. Al Lieber. And he wanted me to go into administration, but I didn't listen to him then. I really just had this kind of calling to be a counselor, so I got my degree in counseling, which I would say was the absolute best training ever to be an administrator. I think every administrator should have to go through training to be a counselor, because you learn how to work with different types of people, how to bring people together if you need to. But anyway, so that would be my second mentor. When I came to Kansas City, I've had so many mentors in Blue Valley, I can't even probably describe all of them. But I would say that the next mentor I had was a principal I had at Blue Valley High School, who I was a counselor at the time. And Dr. King kind of convinced me that, really you should think about administration. So I went in and did that and haven't regretted it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you had people who, along the way, really helped lead and guide
Absolutely.
you and saw the talents and the skills that you had, kind of pointing those out to you along the way.
Right.
And so what advice would you have to people who are in the room and in our audience for how they can help do that for other people in their lives?
So I think we owe it to each other and to our community to do that. I think that it is important for us, and honestly, I think especially in education right now, because that's what I lose sleep over as a superintendent. Really, there are two things I lose sleep over. One is safety of students and staff. But the second one is, are we going to have enough qualified people to continue to have public education? And the only way we're going to do that is if we mentor the next generation. So as teachers, we need to be mentoring our students to go into that profession. As principals, they need to be mentoring our teachers to go into that profession. All of that is so I need to be mentoring the next person to be the superintendent and looking for those skills. But I think it's essential for us to do that as a community, and would go beyond education. We owe it to our community to just help grow leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to when you talked about your decision to go into counseling, and that's what brought you here to Kansas City and specifically to Blue Valley. And so talk about the decision to do that and then how counseling helped shape the leader that you are now.
So when I got my master's in counseling, when I finished that, I moved to Kansas City, and I knew I wanted to be in Kansas City. It was, drive home for a weekend if my parents needed help, but my sister lived here. So I was content on Kansas City. And so I started looking around, and I really wanted to be a counselor. I really wanted, but I was looking at both math jobs and counseling jobs. I interviewed at Blue Valley High, and I tell this story a lot. And as soon as I walked in the door, I almost immediately knew that was going to be home for me. Because I actually walked in, talked to Marilyn Driscoll was her name, who was the counseling administrative assistant. And we actually talked for over 2 hours because everybody else was busy. And you would think, well, good Lord, they made you wait for 2 hours to interview and you still ended up there? But she told me why they were all busy. They were all busy because the counselors and the administrators were all working with students and staff who were distraught because a year previously there had been a horrific accident, and people who live here might remember this, and 3 girls had died on the way from Blue Valley High School to softball practice. I immediately knew that, honestly, if that was that important, that school, they took care of people. And so then we went through the interview, and I just knew right then that was the place for me. And I would say that's why I've stayed at Blue Valley, because I've always felt that connection and that team atmosphere, and that Blue Valley was about, and I think other schools are too, but Blue Valley was about taking care, not just educating kids, because that's important, absolutely important. We want them to have the academic skills, but they have always been about taking care of kids too, and taking care of the adults in the system as well.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you had an incredible foundation, and that's why you stayed. So as you progressed from the counseling office on up through the ranks, through administration, and then when you were tapped to be the next superintendent, and then you had no way of knowing, as none of us did, what 2020 was going to bring. I'm sure you had in your mind, if not a formal 90-day plan of what every new leader thinks they're going to do when they come into their new position. I'm sure most of that went out the door, but I'd like to know what that new plan became, or if there were elements of, when I'm in charge, this is what I'm going to do. What did that look like, and were you able to keep elements of that in place even as you were scrambling with the rest of your team to figure out how we're going to educate kids in a new way, keep everyone safe, and while you're still planning, because of the timing of the takeover or the switch, how you were going to get school started, really within the next 60 days?
Yeah, so I'm sure other people have been in this type of situation. COVID was like nothing anybody had experienced. And I've said multiple times, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And nobody else did either, so there's nobody I could call. Like I said, I had lots of mentors, so I couldn't pick up the phone and call Dr. White, who had been superintendent before me, who was a wonderful mentor, who I still call and ask questions. But I couldn't ask him what to do. I did a couple times, and he's like, Tonya, I don't know what you do. And so that was the hard part of that. But I would say the foundation for me of the 90-day plan or 120-day plan had been about building. I had relationships because I'd been in the district so long, but fostering those and going out in my new role to continue to build those. And I continue to try to do that. Unfortunately, it also was a time where the community just became very divided. And so it was a time where, like I said, the counseling training is awesome, because I used to take pride that you could give me two sets of people who were angry, and we could come together in a room, and I wasn't afraid of the conversation, and we could eventually agree to disagree and at least move on. That wasn't working. So I would say that what I tried to do is to continue to foster those relationships as best I could. And now that we're coming out of COVID, that's what we're trying to do even stronger now.
Yeah, absolutely. So building on that element of success, Blue Valley's reputation is still stellar. One of the best school districts in the country. But as you know, as a leader, we can't just rest on those laurels. And so talk a little bit about your background and the years since you joined the district. How have those achievements and the skill sets that you have, how does that inform the work that you do to make sure that Blue Valley stays the same high-performing district that we've had in the past?
So I think it's been really important over the course of my career that you change with the times. So school, what we want to do, people my age want to look back and say, well, I was successful, and so school shouldn't change. Well, if we leave school exactly how it was when I graduated, kids are not going to be successful. They're not going to be prepared for the world that they're getting ready to go into. So what I would say is that we have to continue to give kids those skills, those academic skills that they need, absolutely. But we also have to listen to our constituents, and that would be not only our parents, but also our businesses. So the chamber, when I can come to meetings here and hear what businesses are looking for, what colleges are looking for, but giving kids those opportunities that they need so that we're not limiting them, they can do whatever they want to when they come to.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into my next topic, which is really workforce. So in this room, we have a variety of employers representing a number of different industries, plus, I see representatives of all three of the school districts that touch Oltjen Park. Some of our government partners are education partners, so really all elements of the workforce ecosystem, which shows the importance of the topic. And every day, members of our staff team, and I have conversations with our employers, and the number one concern that unites all of them is talent, and the need for improving our workforce because, between COVID and baby boomers retiring, we just simply don't have enough people. And we want to make sure that we have the right pipeline looking into the future. And so talk a little bit about some of the changes, when you mentioned we have to stay relevant with the times. We can't do what we did 50 years ago, but we can't even do what we did 5 and 10 years ago. So talk a little bit about some of those changes that you and your staff are doing to make sure that we are shifting with the changing needs, and not just the needs that we have now, but you're looking to the future. They say that education is part of training for jobs that don't even exist yet.
Right.
And so how do you address that challenge?
So first of all, I want to address the fact that this is something that school districts across the country and across Johnson County are working on. And one of the positives that came out of COVID is the collaboration between school districts, both in Johnson County, across the state, across the region. And all of us in Johnson County, and actually on the Missouri side as well, are involved in an initiative called Real World Learning. And Real World Learning is kind of exactly what it sounds like. We want to equip students, we want to give students in high school, and even honestly in middle school and elementary, those real world experiences. We want them to understand what it is to work with a client. We want them to understand what it is to have an internship. We talk about making sure that all of our high school students graduate with what we call a market value asset. And we're trying to do some common terminology. All of us are using that term. So a market value asset could be college credit. That's kind of standard. We've had lots of kids who have done that. It also could be that they have an industry recognized credential. So for example, today I was in a room full of our certified nurses assistant students who were getting CPR trained so they can go out and get that training. Could be other credentials. Could be a welding credential at Johnson County. It could be lots of those different things. They work with clients. They have a client connected project. So they're actually so if anybody in here has those types of things that they want to work with high school students on, let me know. And honestly, any high school or in the Johnson County area would want to work with you on that, or an internship. So that's one example of how we're trying to work with those in our community to make sure we provide those opportunities for our students.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Probably pretty soon we'll have 5th graders doing internships.
Right.
They'll be doing my job.
I know.
So. I'm a little concerned about that. So talk a little bit about how the real world learning and all of that fits into your overall vision for what Blue Valley Schools is all about.
So I believe Blue Valley Schools are all about setting kids up for success. And so again, that is different for every single student. What I think is successful might be different than what you do. But we don't want to limit kids. I want them, when they graduate from Blue Valley High School, that they have both the academic skills that are necessary, as well as those workplace skills we've talked about, team building, collaboration, all of those different things that employers tell us every day are so important. That they have those so that they can go off and make those decisions. Because as you said, that we can't say, oh, I want to go be a teacher, or I'm going to be a nurse. We can say that, but it might change. Those professions might change. They are going to change. They might be doing something when they graduate from college or when they graduate from high school that we don't even know exists right now. And so we just want to give them the skills that they need so that we're not limited.
One of the things that you hear both in the national media but also in the local media is that COVID really impacted both the learning styles, and then ultimately the performance of some of our students. And so talk a little bit about what that has meant over the last 2.5 years for our students, and if it's affected performance, describe that a little bit, and then how you're addressing that.
So I would say that students learned a lot about themselves and their learning style during COVID, and for many of them, and for many adults, you who were working from home, figured out that Zoom didn't really work for you, or all-day Zooms don't work for you, and maybe virtual education didn't work for you. So that's a positive that came out of this, is that our students have figured out the style that they need. But you can't sugarcoat the fact that some kids did struggle during that time. And so we've been talking about, rather than learning loss, we've been talking about how do we take and accelerate the learning to catch up those students who did struggle during that time. And so we've worked a lot on after school or summer school, and what can we do to get those kids back up to speed. And our kids are making progress. They make progress every single day. Our teachers know how to do that. That's what I say to them all the time, is when we had COVID and you were going to Zoom and all of these things, you didn't know how to do that. You know how to do this. You know how to take a kid who's struggling and to get them the interventions that they need so that they can read at grade level, or they can do math at grade level, or they can do whatever it is that we're asking them to do. So we continue to look at that. The other thing I would say is that there are multiple metrics we need to look at. So sometimes you'll get one metric that'll be placed in the media. State assessment seems to be the one that people like to use. There are multiple things that we should be looking at. We should be looking at those market value assets that I just talked about. Are we making progress on those? We should look at state assessments. We should look at ACT scores. We should look at reading assessments that we do. There are multiple things that we should look at, as opposed to one assessment that a student takes on one day in March or April of each year.
Right. Well, and I think we're hearing that from employers, that the things that they need in terms of being successful in the workplace may be a little bit different than what we traditionally thought were important. And so that's part of that continuous system of feedback between school districts and the post-secondary community, as well as employers, to make sure that we're all constantly communicating about what those skills are. And so I think the Real World Learning Initiative is really, really critical. So let's switch gears a little bit. Pre-COVID, you and all the districts, you talked a little bit about collaboration, but I think the first really unique sign of collaboration between the 6 school districts in the county was 0 Reasons Why. And so I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about how that effort came together, and I think that was foundational to some of the mental wellness that has carried the school systems through the pandemic, and maybe what that has meant and what it looks like now.
So that, I can take zero credit for this, because this really was predecessor to me, Dr. White, along with Mike Fulton in Shawnee Mission, John Allison in Olathe, Frank Harwood in DeSoto, Wayne Burke and Pam Stranahan in Spring Hill and Gardner. So the only one that's still here is Frank Harwood. But the 6 superintendents came together, and we were having a rash of student suicides in our schools. And in Blue Valley, we had 5 in 1 year. Shawnee Mission, Olathe, DeSoto, everybody was experiencing this. And so they came together and said, we have to do something about this. And they kind of talked through it and said, we need to ask the kids. Like, the adults aren't going to solve this problem. We have got to ask the kids what to do. And so that's how 0 Reasons Why was born. And eventually, they transitioned that over to Johnson County Mental Health. And Tim DeWeese has continued to lead that group. And what I would say is that group has sustained itself. And kids have graduated, and a lot of times what happens is you have a group of high school kids who are really passionate about something, and then they graduate from high school and you can't keep it going. I've seen more of those organizations. But 0 Reasons Why has continued. And it is really a social media campaign about really making sure high school kids, and they've now moved it into middle school, understand the importance of their own mental health, and that they do matter, and that where to get help if they need it. But it's been a really strong push. And again, to this day, it exists. I just met with some of the 0 Reasons Why leaders from Blue Valley the other day, and they talked about what we could do in our middle schools.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that it's moving into kind of the younger generation. And what I love hearing about that is the collaboration that made it sustainable, with the students, but also the sustainability in each one of the school districts. Given that 5 of the school districts have transitioned to a new superintendent, and yet the commitment is still there. And so I think that speaks really to a culture of collaboration that, not just Blue Valley, every single one of the school districts, and as an organization that really tries to work with them on a number of policy concerns, that impacts our region. We see that, from the outside, that each one of the school districts really has been committed, not just to Zero Reasons Why, but to a number of things that are going to be impactful for Johnson County.
Yeah, the other thing I would say about Zero Reasons Why and the work that all of our districts continue to do around suicide prevention of students is that work has to continue. That's ongoing. It's multi-layered. We do many things, age appropriate, of course. But honestly, last year was kind of a banner year for Blue Valley. For the first time in I don't know how many years, we had 0.
That's wonderful.
0 student suicides. And that was a huge, huge celebration for us. Again, not something that we can rest on our laurels, because that is always, one is too many, is what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So along the same veins, in terms of making sure that our community is one of the best places to live, several years ago as a community, we embarked on Forward Overland Park, as a vision. And a number of leaders in Blue Valley participated in that development. And one of the things that we heard, no matter who the group was that was gathering, whenever we had focus groups, and we started out with a bang with one huge event at the convention center, and there were 700 people there. So whether it was that group or a small group of young professionals in this room meeting, or students at Johnson County Community College, the one thing that we heard was that they wanted Overland Park to be a welcoming community. We hear that concern from our employers, when we ask them what one of the challenges is, aside from just attracting and retaining talent, they want to make sure that they are a welcoming and diverse workforce. And so the workforce, they want to see that diversity and that inclusion reflected all throughout the organization. They want to see diversity in their leadership. They want to see that reflected all throughout the culture. And so I know that Blue Valley has a number, over 100 languages spoken as a second language. So how would you say that you can, as a district, be a leader in helping to train that next generation, in welcoming practices? How can you help our employers with some benchmark great practices, in terms of diversity and inclusion, to help be a leader in the community in that regard?
So that's a great question, and it's a goal for us as a district. It's a goal for other school districts as well, to also hire a diverse set of candidates, but also to be welcoming and accepting of everybody who walks through the door, whether it is a student, whether it's a staff member, whether it's a family who has questions. And our English as a second language population is soaring, and it isn't nearly as large as some of our counterparts around us, but for us it continues to double in the last 5 years. So it is continuing to grow. I just talked to a family who came into district office today who had just gotten here in the country, and we were trying to get them enrolled. So it is an issue that we continue to work for. When we've asked our students and we've asked our families, what is it that we can do to make sure that you feel welcome? What they have told us is it's going to take personal invitations, because just doing those standard things that we send out don't do that. So they need the personal invitations. They need to understand what it is that we're asking of them and what it is that they're coming to. And so that's what we've tried to do. That's what we're working on. That's one of the tasks that we're going to give to our Diversity Board Advisory Committee this year, is how can we help to make sure that our families feel welcome. So I don't have a good answer for you, but it is something
It's a great start.
that we are continuing to work on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's go to that teaser that Kevin gave us about your leadership style being team-centered. So, if I were to pop into a classroom or talk to one of your fellow administrators and say, give me an example of Tonya's leadership style, what do you think they would say? Or what would I observe if I just, came and could wander in, which I know I can't because of safety. If I could wander around one of the schools and catch you in the act, what would I see?
Well, I hope you would see that I'm listening, because I think it's really easy to just go in and want to solve a problem for somebody. But I truly believe that you're going to be much better off if you truly listen to the other person or the team, and you work collaboratively to come up with a solution. You're going to get buy-in that way. Even in my classroom, when I would think back to opening day at a high school in a math classroom, rather than me posting, here's the rules for my class. Well, it's going to go much better if we collaboratively as a group can come up with those, as opposed to me just telling them this is what it is. So that's what I would hope you would see. I also hope that people would say that I'm there to serve them, because I truly do believe that is my job, that there is nothing that's, people make a joke sometimes and say, well, this is probably below your pay grade. I don't like that joke, because I don't think anything is below my pay grade. I don't think it matters what the job is. I think we all need to be prepared to dig in and to assist with that. So I would hope that that's what you would see.
Well, just as a great example of that last comment, I know that I ran into you at a meeting one time during the last school year, and we were talking a little bit about workforce and just what was happening, and COVID and people not being able to come in. And just that day, you had returned from serving lunches in one of the cafeterias. So I know that you don't think anything is below your pay grade. You definitely lead by example. So I appreciate that you do that. I know the members of your team absolutely do as well.
One of the best things that happened with COVID is that our district office staff really were forced, because we wanted to keep our buildings open, to go out and help in our buildings. And it stopped some of the work we were doing at district office, but man, that's nothing else more eye-opening to understand what your teachers are going through, what your cafeteria workers are going through, and a paraprofessional, unless you're in the building doing the work that they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think you have a great reminder of what it was like to be in the classroom or be everywhere in any one of the buildings, and so I think that probably has even better informed your thoughts on workforce and education in general. And so if you were called as a special advisor, and I know that you have the ears of many policymakers already, but if you were called by any state or even federal policymaker to say, we really need your advice on how we're going to fix this situation where we don't have enough people, we don't have enough people going into education that's going to serve our pipeline for the next 20 years, what would be some of the suggestions that you would say in terms of policy shift that would help that?
For education specifically?
For education specifically.
So I would say a couple of things. One is to fully fund us. That's kind of a given. But the second thing I would say is to leave the educational decisions to the experts. So I'm not an expert on teaching kindergarten. I'm just giving an example. So I don't think I should make the decision on what kindergarten curriculum should be. I think the people who are the experts at that, the people who are trained, should do that. I think that our teachers have kind of been, honestly, in public education across the country, have been bombarded with criticism, sometimes just about the what ifs. Well, what if they talk about this? What if they do this? And I think that's why some of our teachers are getting out. So I think that anything you can do to continue, or not to continue, continue, but to make sure that we value teachers and that we don't put rules in place that are going to hinder them.
Good ideas. So I have a niece who just got her very first fourth grade classroom last week, and she couldn't be happier. I mean, she, I think, has found her calling, you know, much like you did, and she was on a different path and figured out that it's the classroom and it's elementary kids where she wants to be. And so, you know, if you had a message in light of, you know, social media and all of this criticism and people feeling like, well, maybe I don't want to be a teacher, maybe I'll just go get a job somewhere else, what would you say to, you know, either a brand new teacher or someone who's been slogging it out for the last 25 years to give them some encouragement about the why?
I would ask them why they got into education. Why did you originally think you wanted to do this? And we need to get you back to that why. We need to, so if it's a teacher who's just starting, I'd want to make sure we had all the supports in place so that, you know, by Labor Day, they're not so overwhelmed they think they have to get out. If it's a returning teacher who's just feeling overwhelmed, I'd again want to look at what are those supports we can put in place to help them get back to that why. Help them center in on the kids again, because I'm guessing that was their why. That's why they did it. It's because they love working with kids. And what can we do to get rid of the noise around you so that you can focus on it?
Great advice. So I want you to kind of think back over your career, you know, as Kevin said, all the way back to grade school when you got your bachelor's degree. Talk about one achievement that you really look back on and say, you know, that's something that I am so proud of. And then maybe a mulligan. You know, I'd really like a chance to do that one over again if I could.
My grandmother was a teacher and taught in a country school, in a one-room country school. Had a 2-year certificate from the university, because that's what you had to have at the time. And other than that, there was nobody in my family who had a college education. So my parents and my grandmother both pushed me really hard to get that college education. So if there's something I'm really proud of, it's the degree, my original degree that I got, my original teaching degree. What my dad often joked with me after that is he didn't realize how much I liked school because I kept going back. But I am really proud of that and proud of the fact that they pushed me and they saw the potential in me to do that. If I had one thing to do over, you know, I don't know if there's anything I would really do over, because I think every experience I've had, and some of them have been more positive than others, but I've grown from every single one. And I think I can look back, even the COVID years, I might want to not have those, but I think I've learned a lot from those, and I think I've grown as a leader and as a person because I went through those.
Yeah. Are there any books that have particularly inspired or shaped the leader that you are?
Well, I've read several books, but one book I read this last year that I actually had our whole administrative team read is a book called The Coffee Bean, and it's a really easy read. It's a book about positive change, and really it's a book that talks about your attitude kind of controlling how you can get through life, and if you have a positive attitude, it just brings about positive change. And that really resonated with me, and I often think of that book if I'm dealing with a difficult situation and I just want to give up. I think about that book. I think about my attitude and how I can make that difference.
Oh, that's great. So as we wrap up here, is there any piece of advice, if you could go back to, you know, young Tonya, making her decision to switch to the STEM field, math and chemistry, what would you say that would make maybe that path just a little bit easier?
I would say to never forget why you got into education, to never forget where you came from or what you're here on earth to do, And you gotta figure that out for yourself, and you have to do that every single day. And if you do that, you're gonna be happy. When you stray from that, that's when it's difficult and not always easy.
Good advice, not just for young Tonya, but for all of us. So I want to thank you on behalf of the Chamber for everything that you do, for everything that your entire team does. It's so very important, and it's incredibly inspiring.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the collaboration that the districts have with the Chamber and with our business community, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Well, we thank you for that. We thank you for today. Thank you, everyone, for being with us, and I'm sure Tonya will stick around
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
a few minutes if you have some personal questions. I did get the question whether or not you were going to be able to lob some of your personal questions during this time, and the answer is no. But you can come up afterward, and I do want to give a final thank you to Kevin from VHC. Thanks for sponsoring this series. We really appreciate it.